devil is going to present an impossible task for you such that you fail, and then he can kick you when you're down. He wants you in despair. See what he did to Judas? He got him despair, and all Judas had to do, he thought there was no hope, right? He'd fallen in despair, and he didn't even know that all he had to wait was 3 days to realize everything's all done and taken care of. There was nothing to fear at all. And so let's be, look out for our 3 days, and don't fall into the trap of all or nothing. Well, I just got to get all these thoughts. I got to stop it right now, because you will fail. And when you fail, you'll feel a loss of identity. You'll begin to unravel more, and you'll feel shame, and you will not be motivated to get back up. And so what you can do is something like this. God meets you where you're at and says, could you give a little more? Not asking for much. Could you do a little less time in anger? I could do that. And then you actually see a progress. Let's think about this too. There's a lot of analogies with betrayal and war, right? Brother set against brother, war, excommunication, moral harm, spiritual soul harm, destruction, death. And when you experience betrayal, you will experience that in different varying degrees. So let's look at Timothy Theosis and say, what's the opposite of war? If war, if our enemies and our brothers are turned against us and become enemies, they betrayed you, we need to find the healing medicine in the opposite, right? And this is a principle going all the way back to the Greeks about medicine, that applying the opposite, for example, we could think of venom. When you're bitten by a snake or a spider, you get anti-venom. If you cut yourself, right, that's harm. Yet, as some of the pre-Socratics ironically and kind of in a humorous way say, but when you're cut, you pay a physician to cut you and heal you. But you have this kind of principle of opposites in the thing that makes you sick. Let's say you are suffering from pride. What does the priest prescribe as medicine for your soul? He usually prescribes the opposite: service, kenosis, acts of almsgiving and charity, the opposite of whatever passion that you're struggling in. So we need to be able to identify this. Betrayal is a type of war. Our brother has become our enemy, and we're in an excommunication. So let me just quote from Theosis. The opposite of war is not peace, but liturgy. The cognitive, bodily, totalizing act that steadily increases communion instead of cutting it. Liturgy is an act that purifies. It knits the character together, whereas trauma unravels our character of liturgy. I give my life for my brother and sister. He's talking in the context of the liturgy because it's focused on Christ. And we reenact this. He says, I give my life for my brother and sister. I renounce retaliation. I give my very body and blood for the entire world. To come back into communion because you're a liturgical being meant for communion. And so if you experience the horrors of war and betrayal, it is not peace. There's no intellectual, secular therapy, reductive therapy that's going to heal that. It is the life of Christ, and the life of Christ is found in the liturgy, because you are a liturgical being. And this is love. That's the command. Diablos, the devil, is the divider, and your being in communion is liturgical. And you're called to love one another, as Christ says, I've loved you. And by this, you'll know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. Okay, what we need to identify too is when this happens, you're in an extremely vulnerable situation to the darts of the demons. Keep that in mind too. And some of these things, when I work through this, I have kind of learning from my spiritual father and the priest I confess to as well, is first, number one, I mean, you can follow some simple steps and practice them, but watchfulness, be on guard. Number two, if you're watchful, then you can identify, I'm being attacked. I'm in a weak position. It's interesting. I just did a confession this Sunday, and Father said, well, I want you to flip the bulletin over and read that. That's your penance for. And it was a whole thing. And I'm like, it's weird. Every single time I do a confession, it's always related to the sermon. Don't you find that odd? Or it's something you've already written or something like that. And he's like, no, not really. But it was, we're in a time after the feast in which Father knew we're extremely vulnerable, that we're going to be under demonic attack. And most of my sins are because I wasn't paying attention, which is, I feel terrible, because I probably say, let us attend and be attentive more than anybody in the entire church. And here I am, the hypocrite, not paying attention. It feels terrible. And that's how I fall in. I keep falling into the trap. So we can learn these things and practice. And then in confession, learn to identify, there was my mistake. And so that's the dart. So I would say, applying to this situation too, when there's somebody in your communion, in your body, in your parish, and they get a divorce, somebody cheating, this is exactly what happened about a year and a half ago. You're extremely vulnerable to attack. You're weak, and it's whatever betrayal it may be. We're gonna learn that be on guard. The demons don't play fair, and they will attack you when you're down, and they attempt to divide, and attempt to what? Everything anti-liturgy, everything anti-communion, diablos. They want you to lose yourself and unwind, and you can see it spread through the community. And part of that is, it chases exactly what you said, is people felt that they had to be forced to choose a side. And people did. And then it caused other issues and stuff like that. So I'm sure the fathers have seen that, before. They've been clergy a lot longer than I have. But yeah, it's a tragedy. It's a war. It's a casualty of war, and it doesn't just affect the people who are married. It affects the entire community and the friends. And yeah, we experienced that firsthand very recently. You said, so there was another betrayal, enemies set against me. And as JP mentioned, I think it was really insightful to, when you're betrayed, when you're attacked, you're slandered, you're dragged through the mud, there's a couple different passions that you immediately fall into: anger, defensiveness, resentfulness, hatred, and you have to watch those. And I've had to take those to confession. And also, I think, JP, obsessiveness. to mull. What the demons are going to do when they hit you with one of those darts, look how nasty that was. Look what that person did to you. What are you going to do about it, right? You start playing with it. They want you to obsess. So what they want you to do is get your eyes off of this. They're just masters of this. Look at that. It's all done. It's completed. He overturned death. There's nothing more to fear. And so all they can get us to do is look away from that icon of the conquering of death and get us, as I always say, to take real estate out in imaginary places. It's insane. So that we waste our time, because St. Paul says, redeem the time. So we fall into these traps, like the four, right? Demonic attacks that I mentioned, to play with the thought, to be angry, and each one can open up another passion and sin. So I had to go through this. I'm sure Father has too. And you go to your spiritual father or your father confessor. And I think something good that Father Hans just pointed out, when I was in confession, my priest said, how long were you angry with this person that betrayed you, that's attacking you? And some of these people do really nasty stuff. And I said, he said 2 days. I'm like, yeah, about probably 2 days. He says, okay, the next time it comes, he says, could you do a day? I'm like, yeah, I think I could do that. And he said, and the next time, half a day. Do you see the devil is going to present an impossible task for you such that you fail, and then he can kick you when you're down. He wants you in despair. See what he did to Judas? He got him despair, and all Judas had to do, he thought there was no hope, right? He'd fallen despair, and he didn't even know that all he had to wait was 3 days to realize everything's all done and taken care of. There was nothing to fear at all. And so let's look out for our 3 days, and don't fall into the trap of all or nothing. Well, I just got to get all these thoughts. I got to stop it right now, because you will fail. And when you fail, you'll feel a loss of identity. You'll begin to unravel more, and you'll feel shame, and you will not be motivated to get back up. And so what you can do is something like this. God meets you where you're at and says, could you give a little more? Not asking for much. Could you do a little less time in anger? I could do that. And then you actually see a progress. And my father confessor said, did you know that St. John Maximus actually had an anger problem? Here's a saint. And he used this tactic where he'd practice over and over and shorten the time. Each time the demonic darts came, he identified it and he spent a little less time. It wasn't an all or nothing, until there was a story that somebody knocked a lampato over or something like that, and he immediately screamed at the parishioner and then immediately fell down on his knees crying for forgiveness. So what he realized is that initial thing, right, the demonic attack, you can get to the point where you don't spend holding on to it. Shorten to the point where as soon as they hit you, immediate repentance and turning back around. And I think that's a really good recipe too, that you don't have to do it all at once. God's just asking, can you give a little bit more, a little bit, and you'll fail. Can you get back up and just do a little bit more? And that's a really manageable project. Also, it gives you a rule and standard measure of, I'm actually getting better. Because that's another thing. You'll fall into despair that I'm not getting better. I'm doing the same sin over and over again. But if you have a metric to be like, I'm actually making progress, God is actually healing me and helping me. So if that helps me, it's really helped me, because you will fall into anger. You will have, and that will turn into hatred, if contempt, all of these things that, and as Father said, the healing medicine of that is forgiveness. Because I had asked the Father about, well, how do you forgive somebody that doesn't want it? Let's say the person that betrays you, I'm not sorry for what I did. In fact, I don't care anything about you. Yet we're called to forgive those who have done that. How does that work? Now, I approach this incorrectly from a typical Western mind, that it's some type of transactional, mutual, hey, I'm sorry. Hey, brother, I forgive you, right? But that's not the Orthodox model of forgiveness. When you forgive somebody that's hurt you, it doesn't do anything to them. What does it do? Well, who does it affect? It affects you. So we could define this. So we're kind of all tying this together. What is forgiveness? It is being released from the captivity of the memory of the past. When God forgives you, he releases you from holding any memory. And for us, that begins to change us ontologically and heals us when we forgive others. Because the only person that is being affected by this is ourselves when we forgive or not forgive. And this is what we all want. You need to identify these passions and sins, captivity. You're being held captive and you can't heal when you're captive. And so the practice of forgiveness, and God will give it to you. He will allow these things. This is another thing we need to ask too. Let us not forget, as we pray in the morning prayers, that all things are sent by you, O Lord. And we have to ask ourselves and acknowledge that the harms and the evils were allowed. And ask ourselves why, and Lord, what do you want me to do? He gives you a cross, and I'll read real quick if you don't mind, and then we can answer some more questions. This is another good, of course, Elder Ephraim has some good stuff to say. Pain. So when we have the trauma, a moral hurt, a spiritual hurt, right? What's happening? We're being held captive and we need to be released. We're imprisoned. But why does God allow that to happen? Why were we, they're crosses, they're given to you. Why Solomon states, my soul and the ocean remain calm. There are times when trials come in succession, one after another, sometimes all at once. Haven't we experienced that? The cross becomes very heavy then. Our apprehension peaks. The soul's ready to bend under the unbearable weight. And I'm speaking to this because JP, as you went through, and maybe others, different types of, what do you feel? Your soul is breaking under unbearable weight. I can't take it. Everything seems dark, pitch black, darkness and dead end fill the horizon. St. Gregor the theologian remarks, the good moments have passed. Difficulties lie ahead, visible and taunting. The journey takes place in the darkness of night. There is no light anywhere. It seems as Christ is asleep. Do you remember at Pascha and all the lights? We get it totally black. And you're in the tomb, you're in the pit. And you can feel that. I mean, I always love that service because it's darkness. Exactly what he's saying. Where's Christ? I'm in the pit. And you'll have this darkness of soul too. And I want you to remember that Paschal evening too, of what it feels like to be in the utter darkness and what happens immediately after. Life's sorrows comprise nails and knives. These nails and knives mercilessly pierce and rip open the human hearts. They set ablaze, paralyze them, and destroy them. The only thing that remains during such moment is the cry that is addressed to God from the supplication, have mercy on me, O Lord. My soul has been greatly distressed. I've grown tired with my sighs. My heart's become like melted wax. Have mercy on me, O Lord, because I am troubled. My life has passed in sorrow, and my years with sighs have been forgotten like a person who has died. My tears have become food for me day and night. Where are you, sad, my soul, and why do you make me unsettled? So here's the question. Remember, too, this is the question of Job as well. Man is the king of creation, however. His crown is woven with thorns. Man's journey at times sounds like a joyful song and symphony, other times, most of the time, it sounds like an unceasingly sorrowful and mournful lamentation. Pain constitutes a great and eternal enigma. It has been the topic of study for philosophers, social workers. We talked about psychiatrists, secular psychiatrists, and many others. Even so, the Christian faith and the law of God provide the most authoritative answer. And here it is. It's the Orthodox Therapia. And the answer, brothers, is twofold. Theologically, it's the consequence, obviously, of the fall, just like any other evils. Is the results of man's incorrect use of freedom. Your brother, your wife, your friend, your community turned against you and became enemies. It's the fruit of disobedience. Ethically, it's an opportunity and means to acquire virtue and perfection, and that's what I want to talk to you about. Theosis and salvation is not a juridical, it doesn't happen in a court room. You're not declared righteous and imputed righteousness. It's ontological. It's to become like God. It's to acquire all the virtues. And there's, unlike natural talents, you can't be born with virtues. Adam and Eve in the garden were in an infantile spiritual and moral state. They hadn't possessed the virtues. And I remember Father George Aquaro asked me once, he says, you know what happened if they resisted the temptation in the garden? Of course, silly me thought, oh, it'd be paradise. And he says, they'd be given a harder temptation and a harder and a harder and a harder cross until they acquired all the virtues and became like God. So we must understand that our theosis and very acquisition of virtues is acquired through the cross, through sorrow, betrayal, just like Christ, and that we live that way. Yet in the midst of that, and think about this, I've thought about it a lot that, you know, in terms of spiritual motivation in my ascetical practice, I'm not great. And I feel like God's such a loving God. He says, you know what, I love you anyways, and I'm going to help you by giving you a lot of pain and suffering. And I have to actually say thank you to God that I'll give you a lot of betrayal, I'll give you a lot of pain, because those heavy crosses advance you so much farther towards the kingdom on the divine ladder of ascent. And when you take those and you take your cross, you honor God. St. Gregor the theologian says, no matter how many difficulties, he always confronts me. Remember, Christ went all the way down into the pit. He says to the thief on the good cross, the good thief on the cross, today you will be with me in paradise. Now, if you think about that, the location was not paradise. You know where the location was for 3 days? The worst place ever. Sheol, the pit. What is Christ saying? I'm with you. I am paradise. He always confronts us in the suffering. I encourage all of you to also watch Beyond Torture, about some of our priests who have actually they're in my episcopate, where Father Roman Braga and Father Calciu, who were tortured in Putest concentration camps. Extreme suffering, he says, a little suffering can make you angry and resentful. I think Father brought this up too. Extreme suffering makes things really easy. There's two ways you can go. You can become a bitter person and you can die in despair. And that's what happened in the concentration camps of Putest. Or you go inward. And Father Calciu says, when you go inward, you find God. There he is. You will find him clearer than anything. There was a student of mine who was doubting the existence of God. And he wanted me to obviously give him a bunch of arguments. He was like, how could you just prove? I'm like, actually, there's a really easy way. And I'm like, you're not going to like it at all. Extreme, extreme suffering. It'll make it real clear. You will not be going, yeah, but what about this or what about this? It forces you into a situation where you meet Christ. You have to go inwards. The pain, St. Gregory says, constitutes as medicine of salvation. Remember what I said. Why is God allowing this to happen? God allows all things inasmuch as that he can bring about a greater good, as St. Augustine says in the Inciterum. And then St. Basil says, your salvation and your medicine, your healing is in the pain. Find God there, brothers. St. Basil says, since God is preparing the crown of his kingdom for us, let illness be the cause for virtue. God wants you to become like him. And what do? Father, you remember the prayer and the liturgy of St. Basil? You call upon God to make the evil good. I love that prayer. That's what God does. He takes the evil and he makes it good. Your healing and your becoming more human, your restoration liturgically to reconstitute your being in communion liturgically is going to be found exactly in that. To make the evil good. And St. John Chrysostom states, sorrow brings us closer to God. When we consider the eternal benefits of sorrows, we will not be distressed. And the Holy Apostle Paul, who experienced such persecution and pain, betrayal, obviously, full of wounds of Christ, teaches that God allows man to suffer adversities for our profit, that we may be partakers of his holiness. And so I can keep going on that, but I want to pause for a little bit and just, Christ says something. He talks about judgment. He talks about judge not, lest you be judged, for you'll be judged in the same way. But he also talks about to judge righteously. So what sort of kind of judgments are we to make? When you undergo a betrayal, an evil, a suffering, slander, persecution, the question you should be asking, Lord, teach me, as we say, as the priest says in the liturgy, what to do and say. And he does teach us. And it's always in the terms of healing. He takes the deaf man and he spits into the ground with the muddle and he puts into his ears. He cannot spiritually, he's basically telling us, you can't spiritually hear. You're spiritually blind and deaf to the word that I'm teaching you. He puts his divine energies into matter. He incarnates himself and he puts the spit muddle into the man's ears. And he says in Aramaic, epata. That word means be open. When you experience the suffering, judge not if it's good or bad. Be open. Believe in God, and we're going to talk about the virtues, and I'll list them, and then we can open them up for conversation. All of these things are allowed to happen. your crosses to make you become more like God. Christ has all the virtues, and we're going to acquire those. And there's no way to, let me put it this way. You want resurrection? We all do. Guess what? There's no resurrection without a crucifixion, either for Christ or for you. Don't think that you can actually become like Christ and be healed without the cross and sorrows and sufferings. That is the way, to acquire the virtues. And virtues is what ontologically changes you to become like Christ. Let's name them. There's three primary theological virtues. Faith. I don't define faith as mere fidelity, or certainly not an intellectual belief. Faith is an action. You took it when you, for those of you who came in to be baptized and made catechumens, what did you do? You're facing the world, the devil and death, and you turned his back on him. Metanoia, a changing of mind and physical orientation. And guess what you did? You walked into the ark. And guess what you did? You spit on the devil and said, I'm done. Now, that had consequences. You basically told the devil, game on. Like, he's going to come after you. But notice, that's faith. Faith is an action. It's actually a work. Protestants have this incorrect. It's a walk towards God. Father Russell tells the story about the guy walking on the tight rope across the Niagara Falls. And he says, you believe I could do it backwards? Everybody says, I believe. He does it backwards. He gets a wheelbarrow. I believe you can do it with a wheelbarrow. He puts a pig in there. You believe I could put a pig in there and walk across? I believe. Do you believe I could do the pig? The pig, jumping around. Can you believe I could do it backwards? Yes, we believe. Does it backwards with the pigs swirling around and squeaking. And he says, do you believe that I could put one of you in there and walk across? They said, we believe you. Great, who's up? And nobody stepped up. That's faith. Faith is an actual work. Okay, number one virtue. Number two, hope. We hope. It sustains us. In the midst of the sorrows and betrayals and persecutions, epita, to be opened, is to have hope, against all odds. We hope. Three, love. Love is not a feeling. It's not an emotion. It is greater love has no man than this, that he lays down his life to be able to suffer for the other. And that's going to be part of your healing too. The kenotic, right, experience in the liturgy is carried out to your brothers who are also injured. And what do? It's not mere empathy. Empathy doesn't do anything. Sympathy doesn't do anything. It's a sort of empathy that I can suffer for you. I'll lay down my life in service. That begins to heal you and others. Those are the three primary theological virtues. And there's moral ascetic virtues too: repentance, humility, prayer, obedience, patience, chastity. How about self-control, which we talked about? When I undergo these things, I'm held in bondage. I don't have control. I'm angry. I say things that I don't want to, and do things I don't want to do. I'm impatient. I'm definitely not humble. And I'm not willing to repent the longer I stay in that. I'm certainly, here's another virtue that's important, moral virtue for us Orthodox: generosity and almsgiving. In those states, am I giving, or am I absorbing into myself and breaking communion? Meekness. You don't know a man until they undergo, you don't know who they are when everything's going great, right? You see who a man truly is, and yourself, guess what? In the worst circumstances. When people hate and revile and spit on you, are you meek? When they betray you, when they crucify you, are you meek? The additional virtues, forgiveness, discernment, and Eucharistia, thanksgiving. Now, I've listed all of those for you. We could probably add more to that. How in the world do you think I get those? Lord, give me patience and humility. Yes, he will give you it, and it will be hard. The answer is really easy, but it's really difficult too. So we need to be open. The things that look bad, and I'd like you to think about your life. A lot of the, going back, the things that you thought were the worst things, were they really? Or were they good things? And what do those things mean in all of eternity too?
Men are in crisis. And men are in crisis because they don't know who they are or what they were created for. It affects their lives in big ways. You were not meant to struggle alone. Step out of the chaos. Discover the man that God created you to be. We challenge you. Join us. You will discover a life worth living. Join the brotherhood.